Hey guys, this is Ryan from Thai eVape. Today I'm going to go through the Kayfuns and how to set them up. First thing I'm going to go through is the individual parts of the Kayfun. The Kayfun 3.1 and the Kayfun Lite Plus, Lite Plus version 2, they're all pretty similar, as well as the Russian 91%. So starting at the top, you have your drip tip. Some of them are 510 style drip tips, some of them are like this one, a screw style. You have your top cap. The top cap has an O-ring around the side and an O-ring on the center. You need to make sure both O-rings are there. Then you have your tank sections. Alright, they'll fit together like this. You should have O-rings on the center tank section. This is your chimney. Some of them come with O-rings, some of them don't. I haven't found that it matters. This is your chamber, your vaporization chamber. Doesn't have any O-rings. This is your positive portion of the build deck. Some of them have screw holes in the side, some of them don't. Usually the 3.1 versions do. Alright, these are your two insulators for your positive post. These are important. Make sure they're not melted or deformed or anything. You'll have problems. You'll have serious problems if your Kayfun's shorting out. Some of them on the cheaper versions, the Fastech versions, this is just a flat piece, and this is 3 paper O-rings or washers. So the ones that are plastic or Delrin seem to last much longer. Right. This is where it gets different. These pieces right here are for the Kayfun 3.1. These are for a Kayfun Lite Plus. So here you have the main build deck section on the 3.1. Has an O-ring right here. Most of them that I've seen have this type of fill hole. This is a ball bearing with a spring. These ones I don't like, and I'll top fill. I don't use them. I've found very few people that use them effectively. This is the center post screw. Your catch base and your 510 screw, 510 center positive screw. On the Lite Plus, you can see there's only 2 pieces. Again, there's an O-ring down here. There's a screw that goes in here. This is just an extra piece I have for a bottom fill, and this is your center post. Alright, so it's all one piece. Okay, next is assembly. Alright, I'll start with the base here. You want to put your insulator in. It just pops in there. This one's kind of tight. You can see it pops right in there. Your other insulator that goes on the bottom, make sure it's in there. Your center screw. Stick it through there, and you thread it onto the build deck. Now you can see here, if I tighten this screw, it'll make the build deck move. And if the build deck turns too much, it can cause a short between the negative and positive sides. So what you want to do when you're tightening this is use a pair of pliers, line this positive section up, and then tighten up your center screw. And then just make sure that it's in place. Now you don't want to tighten it too much. If you tighten it too much, it can break that little piece of plastic right there, the insulator, which is bad for business. Alright, next section I'm going to put on the base plate, the catch plate, and the 510 pin. On the 3.1, this is adjustable. If I was building the Kayfun Light or the Kayfun Light Plus, this screw is not adjustable, because if you tighten it or loosen it, it'll just loosen or tighten the build deck. On the actual Russian 91%, it is adjustable. It's a two-piece screw where this section right here actually is a separate screw that screws into this cylinder, which makes it adjustable. Alright, so the rest of assembly, after your coil and everything's on there, the vaporization chamber goes on, the chimney goes on, the tank, and again, make sure your O-rings are good. Again, O-rings on the center section. Again, your O-rings here, the chimney, I'm sorry, for the chimney, and your drip tip, or mouthpiece. And that's the initial assembly. Alright, next thing I'm going to go over is building the coil. So I've cut myself about a 10 centimeter section of 30 gauge canthal, which is what I like to use. So the first thing to do is torch that to take out the springiness. I like to use 30 gauge because of the low mass, it heats up really fast. So I'm going to use a 2mm drill bit. Now when you're making the coil, you want your legs to be on the counterclockwise. If you were looking at a clock, I guess the 9 o'clock of the screw. So I'm going to hold it with the long piece towards my body underneath the drill bit, and I'm going to go for about 7 wraps. The first wrap doesn't count, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to back out that first wrap. I'm just pulling on either side to tighten it up a little bit. Put it in the tweezers. Torch it till it's red. Let it cool down a bit. Stick it back on the drill bit. Now, you want to hold the coil in position using the drill bit. And I like to keep it perpendicular to the deck in the direction of the juice channels. I'm just going to tighten down one leg. Pull the other leg tight. And I'm tightening down the other leg. Alright. So once you've got both legs tightened, you can kind of roll it and get the coil into position. You want it right over the air hole, and then what you want to do is you want to pull it directly away from the air hole. So that gives you a bit of clearance up off the deck, because what you don't want, get this to focus, you don't want this leg to short out between the positive and the negative sides. That's right there. And that's why you want to pull it up off the build deck. And that right there is giving me a 1.6 ohm coil. So I'm just going to twist the legs off. I'm going to put it on my mod and dry fire it a little bit. It's heating up nicely from the center there. And that's just how you want it, from the center out. Usually what I'll do is I'll let it get hot, let go of the button, and then squeeze it together if there is any problems. This coil looks fine. And that's the coil. Okay, the next thing I'm going to go over is the wicking. I've tried several different methods of wicking, and I'm going to show you two methods that I've found to work really well. So the most important thing before you start wicking, wash your hands. The oils in your hands can get easily soaked up by the wick, by the cotton or silica or whatever you're using. So make sure your hands are really clean. Wash them with soap. Alright, and the first method I'm going to show is the P. Bissardo method, which I used for a long time and works really well for me. I just unroll the cotton ball and I'm going to pinch off a little bit. So that's about 4 centimeters. And then what I like to do, I like to pull my cotton apart. To make it nice and even and fluffy. So you should be able to get an idea here of how transparent it is when it's pulled apart. I'm just going to snip off what I don't need. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of form it up, twist one end, and run it through the coil. Now, when I run it through the coil, what I want to do is hold the coil in place. And I'll show you with the tweezers. And I'm going to keep pulling close to the coil. If I pull out here, it has a tendency to rip the cotton. So I'm just going to pull through. I'm going to go most of the way, and then I'm going to back it out the other way. I'm just going to use my finger here to hold the coil in place. Alright, so you can see what I've got right there. I'm going to pull both ends up straight up, put the atomization chamber, vaporization chamber on, and I'm using the Fast Tech PMMA sections here so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Alright, so I'm just going to pull these straight up, kind of clean them up, and then I'm going to snip them off. Kind of fluff them out a little bit. Right, the next part, I like to use just a blunt tip syringe for this. Let me zoom in a little bit so I can show you what I'm doing. Alright, what I'm going to do is fold these edges over and then tuck them in so that the edges of the cotton are going first. And when I push this needle down, I'm not going to push the cotton into the juice channel. I'm just going on the sides. That way the juice channel doesn't get blocked. I'll do the same with this side. Just using the end of the needle to kind of separate that extra cotton that's fluffed all around there. Alright, and this part here I find to be the most important. I'm going to take the syringe and kind of pick up any extra cotton off the build deck and push everything to the sides. Because if you have any cotton touching that build deck on the top portion, it's going to make it leak down the air hole. So just a couple seconds cleaning it up. And then put some juice on it, a couple drops. Till it's nice and saturated. And then I'm going to do the same thing again once it's wet, because it'll stick better. But you got to be a little bit more gentle. Just clean it up and lift it off that build deck. stick it on here, give it a test fire. So it's firing nicely. Now I'm just going to take this off and show you what I was talking about. What I was trying to do is lift this cotton right off of the build deck. So you would have something like that. Oh, that's not too good. Once you get the hang of it, it's real easy to do. Let me try to get this in focus. See, I can see right through these sections here and here. That's what you want. You don't want anything touching this portion of the build deck. So that's the first method. That's my variation, I guess, on the P. Basardo method of doing it. And the next method I'm going to show you is, I think it's called the ITO coil, or ITO wick. And I've been doing this for a little while now, and it seems to work really well. So I've got another piece of cotton here, same thing. Make sure everything's really clean. I wipe everything down with a rag before I start with this. You're going to take a similar piece of cotton, open it up the same way I opened up the first one, and I'm just going to lay it down, put some juice on it. And then just kind of roll it up like you're rolling a cigarette. Just keep rolling it. You don't want it tight, but you want to get everything as even as you can and nice and tidy. Okay. I'll clean this up a little bit. And likewise, just thread it through, try to hold the coil in place. You're going to get a lot of dripping juice coming out, which is no problem. But if you're doing this with a Kayfun Light or Light Plus, you might end up having to clear out the air hole afterwards. Alright, so kind of the same thing. I'm just going to try to clean this up so that everything is smooth and it won't bend over itself when you fold it down. Touch the build deck. Alright, so I'm going to snip it a little closer than the edges of the oops, let me get this zoomed in, a little closer than the edges of the Kayfun. So we'll snip it right there. Snip it right there. I'm just going to kind of fluff these ends up a little bit. Snip another millimeter roughly off each side. Actually, it should be good right there. And then I'm just going to fold these down, just gently rest them on this lower section of the base plate build deck. Again, use the syringe to just clean everything up, make sure it's not, none of that wick is touching the build deck. Once I screw that on, I'm just going to line these back up. And you want to make sure that these are covering those channels, not pushed into them, just covering. Test fire. And there we go. And those are the two methods that I use to wick the Kayfun. So now we got everything done, it's time to close everything up. Put on the chimney here. Again, I'm using the clear section so you can see what's going on. Make sure your O-rings are all in place when you're doing this. And I'm just going to top fill with this one. I can just use the bottle. Alright, so it'll take about 4.2 milliliters when you're top filling. I overfilled it a little bit. So basically just set the top on there, screw it in a couple threads, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my finger around all these holes and hold it upside down for a couple seconds, just to let all the liquid kind of drain off. And then just screw it in the rest of the way. And I could have got a few more mLs in there, but that's basically it. And she's vaping fine. Now, if you get when you top fill, if you get any gurgling going on, the easiest thing to do to clear that out, and you'll mostly find that on the Kayfun lights and light pluses. Best thing to do is take a piece of paper, hold it lightly on the outside of the air hole, hold it upside down, and just blow through. And you'll blow out any liquid that was in that air passage. You can do the same thing with this, but since this has the catch plate, you'll get a lot more juice will sit in there. So if you do that, you want the air hole to be facing kind of downward, and do it more at a 45-degree angle. So there's the air hole, and I have it face downward. I don't really have any leakage in there, so everything's good. I think we're good. Okay, the last thing I'm going to go over is troubleshooting, and I'll try to get as many of the things as I can remember. The main problem that everybody seems to have is leaking out the air hole. And 99% of the time that I've seen, that's just in your build, your cotton's touching the build deck. The other problem it could be is if your juice channels aren't covered. If the cotton isn't going all the way down and touching those juice channels, covering them lightly, it lets the juice just flow right through. So I don't know if you can see it, but the cotton should just be lightly touching, and it's easy to see with these clear sections, but it's pretty easy to figure out when you're building it. Next is dry hits, and there's a bunch of different ways you can get dry hits. If the juice channels are too shallow or choked off as in you shoved cotton down into them, it'll prevent it from wicking properly. If the cotton's too tight in there, packed down too hard, it can prevent it from wicking properly. The worst culprit I've seen, the hardest to figure out, is if your seals are bad somewhere. If one of your O-rings is letting some air in. I've seen it happen with the bottom fill screws. If they're not making a good seal, this is meant to work through somewhat of a vacuum. As you draw, the air will go, the air and the juice will get pulled into the vaporization chamber. So if there's an O-ring that's bad, or in some cases if your airflow's open too much, it won't be able to pull that juice into the wick. So the first thing you can do is try tightening your airflow, or you can just cover up the air hole, and while you're drawing on it, just tap your finger on the air hole like so. You should be able to see some air, if you're using a clear tank, some air bubbles come up. You can see some right there floating up. Okay, sometimes you can get a short, especially on the Kayfun lights or light pluses. If you get a hard short, could mean your center post wasn't tightened down securely enough. And on atomizers with a fixed pin, if you screw it in and it's not tightened down securely enough, it can cause the positive section of the build deck to twist and short out. So when you're assembling it, make sure that's nice and tight. Leakage through the bottom, I get that a lot on the Kayfuns, the light pluses and the lights and such. You can see it coming right here through the airflow control screw. There's a little bit oozing out. Just make sure if you have O-rings, they're not damaged. If you don't have O-rings on a bottom fill hole, see if you can find a little O-ring and stick it in there. I have that on my other Kayfun that I can't seem to find. Oh, here it is. I added an O-ring in there. You can see it kind of popping out. But to some extent they all will ooze a little bit. And that's all I can think about. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments on either the YouTube page or on the thread. And good luck.